With me now is former CIA officer turned whistleblower Jeffrey Sterling. Jeffrey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Of course, doing well. As we record, it is Daniel Ellsberg Week, a week for honoring whistleblowers and peacemakers. Could you quickly tell me who is Daniel Ellsberg to you and why does he matter to the whistleblower community?
Uh, Daniel Ellsberg means a tremendous amount to me. He is a personification of whistleblowers. As I said before, when you think of Daniel Ellsberg, when you think of whistleblowers, you think of Daniel Ellsberg. Maybe he's whistleblower number one. That he's being honored with a week is just so fitting and so appropriate and so needed. And just for whistleblowers in general, because he keeps the eye, he keeps our attention there, where it needs to be, that there are people who will stand up for the truth, those who will blow the whistle on wrongdoing and illegalities by the government, especially. And for me personally, when I was released from prison after being wrongfully convicted of leaking classified information, he reached out to me because, he had those experiences as a whistleblower and going through that hell, if you will, of being charged under the Espionage Act. And that meant a lot to me. So, there's the, cultural aspect of Daniel Ellsberg that is important, but there's also that personal aspect for me.
Right. And, speaking of your experience as a whistleblower and being on trial as a leaker and falsely charged and all of this, can you quickly run through your story and how you became a CIA whistleblower?
Yeah. I joined the CIA, all the ideologies of serving my country, doing the right thing, sort of thing. And I was working with, I was an Iranian expert. I spoke Farsi, learned all things I could about Iran to be an effective clandestine officer facing the Iranian target. I was involved in an operation that I was assured of safeguards. The operation was designed to thwart or slow down the Iranian nuclear program, their aim for nuclear weapons. I was given assurances about the operation, that it was safe, that it would be effective. The design of the program was to have me work with a Russian scientist to get faulty nuclear plans, faulty plans to a nuclear weapon to the Iranians. Well, the plans weren't faulty. They were just obvious and obviously fixable. I sounded the alarm about that, and because instead of thwarting or slowing down the Iranian nuclear program, giving them plans, real plans to a nuclear weapon would speed their program up. I made my concerns known. I was summarily, shuffled out of the operation I was involved in, and eventually from the agency. I took my concerns as a whistleblower to the Senate and House Intelligence Committees. The end result of all of it was that I was eventually charged with violating the Espionage Act because information related to that operation ended up in the hands of a journalist who published it in a book. I was put on trial for violating the Espionage Act, and amazingly, on absolutely no evidence, found guilty and served 2.5 years in prison.
Wow, that's insane. And you maintain your innocence, of course.
Oh, absolutely. I did not convey or transmit any classified information to anyone. I always played by the rules when I was with the agency. I did so when I went to the intelligence committees. I did so when I filed my lawsuit against the agency. So it very interesting and difficult track. And again, a big foundation for my issues with the agency also, or at least the agency's animosity towards me, was that while I was at the agency, I filed a suit against the CIA for racial discrimination. I was a up and coming case officer in the Directorate of Operations with the agency. And I wasn't receiving the same opportunities as other officers. I wasn't receiving the same tools or support trying to be a case officer. Yet I was expected to do the same, if not more, than other officers, other white officers in the same position as mine. I did sue the agency because, the agency told me when I asked why, my management told me to my face, you kind of stick out as a big black guy speaking Farsi. I was successful as an officer with the agency, yet when it came time for my promotion, when it came time for me to rise up in the agency, then they realized I was black and that I couldn't be part of their club. And I did sue the agency for racial discrimination. My suit was
Wow.
not allowed to go forward. I didn't lose my lawsuit against the agency. It wasn't allowed to go forward because the presidential Bush administration, the agency Department of Justice, argued that for my case to go forward, it would pose a threat to national security. I'm still taken aback by just the reality of that a black man fighting for his civil rights in this country is a threat to national security. So my case wasn't allowed to go forward, not on the merits, but because of national security.
But
Um,
yeah,
so
that seems to be a pattern we see continually. So it sounds like you were dealing with racism being treated unfairly. And then when you tried to go above and beyond, when you tried to actually stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, because the strategy that the CIA had put in place was to give Iran fake plans, they were actually not that fake. They were good enough that they could have quickly just resolved and ended up with a nuclear weapon.
absolutely, absolutely. And I made my concerns known because, of course, I was given every assurance that this operation was safe. There was nothing, no threat would be posed to the U.S. If anything went wrong with the operation. I was assured that the highest levels of government had approved the operation. But in an instant, I realized and it became apparent to me that all of those assurances were they were lies. And this instead of a useful operation, it became a dangerous one.
Wow. So that's scary that you try to actually do the right thing and you end up getting punished for it. Are there other ways that the government or the CIA had that they generally make whistleblowing difficult for people?
There's no protections for whistleblowers. If the government is the one being accused of wrongdoing or violating the law, there's no protection for those whistleblowers. And when you think about it, the government considers whistleblowers leakers because the government is the only one in charge of the dialogue of determining who is or who is not a whistleblower, especially when the government is the one being accused of wrongdoing. There are no whistleblowers. There's only leakers. The government gets up and their case and their arguments mainly center around character assassination of the individual who is whistleblowing. It's like, this isn't a whistleblower, this is a leaker sort of thing. They focus on that individual. They take our attention away from the issue at hand, the illegality at hand. They take our attention away from that and focus on the individual. So you're essentially blaming the victim because, to the government, because they're in charge of the dialogue, there are no whistleblowers. There's only leakers. So there are no protections for whistleblowers in that context.
Wow. If you could go back, do anything differently, would you do anything differently?
Certainly not. That's a question that I've always had. I've certainly had time to think about, especially while I was sitting in federal prison. But no, I would not have changed or done anything differently. One thing for me is always being able to like the person I see in the mirror. And had I, one, not stood up for myself against the discrimination, had I not stood up against a faulty operation at the CIA, had I not, stood up against the false charges of violating the Espionage Act, I never would have been able to really look at myself in the mirror. I know it's been a difficult road. I've been through some hellish experiences, but I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't change anything about me.